Let's talk now, though, to Gavin Mortimer, writer at Spectator, of course, because we've got plenty to discuss. And later on in the show, we're going to be going live to Tirana in Albania, where we're going to speak to an Albanian MP, Jorida Tabaku, all about how the Albanian problem seems to have been solved, because fewer and fewer numbers of young Albanian men are coming across the channel. Why? Because we did a deal with Albania to send them all back if they were coming here illegally. It could be the answer, could it not? Gavin, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Amazing how when you actually do something that puts people off coming, they stop coming. You know, genius.
Yeah, absolutely, and credit to the government for Rishi Sunak. He met the Albanian Prime Minister in December and they thrashed out this agreement. Obviously, it's in Albania's interest because they're waiting to join the EU. But it shows, you know, if you sit down, discuss, use common sense, you can agree a good policy. I have to say, though, Mike, as is so often the case with the migrant crisis, the good news always tempered by the less so good news. And there's a record number of Indians crossing the channel. I think there's a very good article in the Spectator today. 675 crossed in the first 3 months of this year, 683 in the whole of 2022.
Right.
So obviously, in a couple of days ago, India surpassed China as the most populous nation. There's now 1.4 billion. So a lot of potential there.
Well, this is the trouble, isn't it? Because clearly what we can see is a pattern emerging here where human traffickers sort of almost kind of alight on a new business, you know. So the Albanian business has dried up, so they'll go, OK, what can we do now then? Let's go and find some other group of people from another country who want to come here. And once they can go there and sell it, because they operate like a sort of, you know, a department store almost, you know. They go to these countries and say, right, we can get you into Britain. Once you get there, you don't have to worry about anything. You'll be able to stay. You won't have to worry about being sent back. And all of that happens, and they can just continually move from one country to another, can't they?
Absolutely, and we've seen that in North Africa. Maloney, one of the things Georgia Maloney did when she became Prime Minister in September last year was do a deal with Libya to stop the number of people leaving from Libya to Italy. What's happened? They simply moved to Turkey.
Yeah.
These gangs, Albanian and Turkish gangs in particular, very well organised, very well financed. And it is like whack-a-mole. You close down one route and another one opens up.
Right.
And that's why Maloney, who's coming to London tomorrow to discuss with Sunak, she said time and again, we've got to set up hotspots outside Europe where we can distinguish between genuine refugees who deserve our compassion, as we showed with Ukraine, and economic migrants, which are what the Indians are. They're coming here, but some of them have got family links. Many of them, of course, have actually had their application rejected because they didn't meet work or education requirements, so they've come illegally.
Right.
And this is what we've got to tackle.
Well, it might also help, might it not, if there was one or two borders that they had to come through. A few border crossings wouldn't go amiss in the central part of Europe, but of course there aren't any. And that's part of the problem as well, because once you're into basically Western Europe, there's nothing to stop you getting to Calais, and then there's nothing to stop you getting in a boat. No,
there's not. And the French there's quite a bit of tension on the French-Italian border, Mike, down here in the southeast of the country, because an increasing record numbers of migrants are landing in Italy, by the way, 35,000 this year, which is 27,000 more than at this time last year. Yeah. And many of them want to come to France or want to come to England, depending whether they speak French or English. They don't want to stay in Italy. And so a huge number are trying to breach the French-Italian border, particularly unaccompanied minors. I think there are about 600 in March alone. And some of them may be minors, but as we've seen before, a great many of them aren't. They're strapping young men in their early 20s who have been told, again, they've been coaxed by the people smugglers, oh, listen, say you're 15, say you're 16. You'll go straight through. Yeah,
exactly right. A couple of things to mention to you as well. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is in a bit of hot water here because he came out yesterday and basically said that MPs should be careful as the illegal migration bill gets back into Parliament later on today, that they should heed the warnings of protest over migrant hotels or they might lose the trust and respect of the British public. And he talked about the astronomical numbers of arrivals, which is certainly the case so far this year, cannibalising compassion for genuine refugees. And, of course, he's now been been accused of being racist for using the word cannibalise, which sort of proves his point, you know, because all the people who think that, you know, everybody's welcome and that we've got room for absolutely anyone that fancies coming would only have to be racist themselves to think that the word cannibal is somehow something to do with the colour of somebody's skin. Well, the only cannibals I know about are those Argentinian rugby players and Jeffrey Dahmer, all of whom were white, as far as I know.
Yes, it's another indication of the intellectual immaturity of some of the people today, that they act like 14-year-olds. And I think it's a deliberate tactic, Mike, to try and divert attention from the real issue. And Robert Jenrick talked about the dangers of around social cohesion. If you a huge number of illegal immigrants arrive. And in fact, the main story, Mike, if I just may say this quickly, dominating the French news this week, is that on Monday in the Indian Ocean island of Mayotte, which is off Mozambique, an operation was launched to remove a huge shanty town that has grown up in the last 10 years or so from the Comoros Islands, which are about 50 miles off Mayotte. And the population of Mayotte has doubled from 180,000 to 360,000 in the space of about 14 years, ever since Mayotte became a French department. In other words, it gets money from the French state. So its hospitals have improved, its education system have improved, and this makes it very attractive for illegal immigrants. And there's been a huge surge in crime and insecurity, and the locals aren't happy, and they want something done about it. And it's taken a decade for the police, the French government, to finally act. What's happened? 12 hours after this operation began, human rights lawyers forced its suspension. It's now in the courts. The locals are furious. And again, it's just, I tell you this because it's another sign of how the human rights industry is working against the interests of a majority people, whether it's in an Indian Ocean island of Mayotte or whether it's in Europe. That governments are being frustrated in carrying out the wishes of the majority people. Opinion polls in France and Britain show that 2/3 of people want something done about illegal immigration, but these human rights organisations and lawyers are preventing the government from carrying out what the people want.
Well, there's an awful lot of money in it. I mean, we're still fighting the idea that if you come here illegally and you are turned down for asylum, that you should be able to then access legal aid to challenge it. I mean, it's complete madness, isn't it?
It is complete madness, and it is leading. Robert Jenrick is quite right. It is leading to an increase in social tensions. But of course, these well-paid human rights lawyers don't see that because they all live in their salubrious
ivory towers.
Yeah, exactly. They don't. It's the working class people who suffer most from mass uncontrolled immigration, because there's a breakdown in schools, in harder to get a GP, harder to get your child into school. And it's just, life is becoming increasingly difficult, and you can understand people's frustrations.
Absolutely right. And just one final thing, Gavin. Rishi Sunak today saying he's going to try and urge European Union countries to let British travellers through the E-gates where they used to go when they were members of the European Union. I'm not sure the French and the Spanish are going to go for it, but they do allow it in Portugal, so they could if they wanted to.
And it's annoying, Mike. Rishi Sunak, he was in a great fanfare last month, went to Paris. He and Macron was a bromance. They are hugging each other. They were best friends. You know, this is the sort of thing that he should be hammering out with Macron. And it's a little thing, but it does just convey the impression that the countries are working together. And this is something that's not being done. And it's, again, it's a sign, I think, of a sulkiness of the EU ever since Brexit. And it's time that we sat down and started talking like adults, and just really, because it would, at a time when we've got the threat of Russia, the threat of China, we need cooperation between European countries, regardless of whether we're in the EU or not. And so leaders must act responsibly, act maturely, and sort these things out.
Yeah, absolutely right. Gavin, couldn't agree more. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. Gavin Mortimer from The Spectator there.